All right, well, just settle into your posture for meditating this morning. Any posture will work. It's best if your, whatever posture it is, allows you to breathe freely and deeply. And once you find that posture, just go ahead and connect with your breath. Take a few free cycles of breath, inhaling and exhaling. And then we'll go ahead and get started. As always, we'll sync up our breath here at the beginning by all taking an inhale here. Om. Ata Patanjala Yoga Darshane Samadhipadaha Tritiya Dhyayaha Sutra Padaha Tapasvadyayeshvara Pranidanani Kriya Yogaha Samari Bhavanarte Kleshatanu Karanathascha Avidya Smitaraga Dvesha Vinivesha Pancha Kleshaha Avidya Kshetram Uttaresham Prashuptatanu Vichinodaranam Anicca Suchi Dukanatma Sunicca Suchi Sukatma Kyatira Vidya Trig Darshana Shaktyo Yekatma Teva Smita Sukhanushayi Ragaha Dukhanushayi Dveshaha Svarasavahi Vidushopi Tataruroho Biniveshaha Te Pratiprasavaheya Sukshmaha Dhyana Heya Ashtadvrittayaha Kleshamula Karmashayo Drishta Drishta Janma Vidaniyaha Satimule Tatipakajaya Yorpogaha Te Halara Paritapapala Punya Punya Hitutvat Parinama Tapasamskara Dukayir Guna Vritya Virodakcha Dukameva Sarvam Vivekina Heyam Dukamanagatam Drashta Drishyo Samyoga Heya Hetu Prakasha Kriya Siti Shilam Bhutendriyatmakam Bhogarpa Vargatam Drishyam Vishesha Vishesha Lingamatra Lingani Guna Parvani Drashta Drishyamatra Shuddhopi Pratyayanu Pashaha Taraktayeva Drishyasyaatma Kritartam Pratinashtam Apanyashtam Taranya Sadaranatvat Svashvami Shaktyo Svarupo Palade Hetu Sem Yoga Tasya Hetura Vidya Tarabhavat Sem Yoga Bhavo Hanam Tadrishe Kaivalyam Viveka Kyatira Viplava Hanupaya Tasya Sattata Pranta Bhumi Pranyaha Yoganganusthanara Shurikshaya Jnanadiptira Viveka Kyate Yamaniyama Sanna Pranayama Pratyahara Dharana Dhyana Samadayo Stavangani Ahimsa Satya Steya Brahmacharya Parigraha Yamaha Yati Desha Kala Samayana Vachinna Sarva Bhauma Mahavratam Saucha Santosha Tapasvadyayeshvara Pranidanani Niyamaha Vitarka Badane Pratipaksha Bhavanam Vitarka Himsadaya Krita Karita Numodita Loba Kroda Moha Parvakam Ridu Madhyari Matra Dukanyananta Palaiti Pratipaksha Bhavanam Ahimsa Pratishtayam Tad Sannidha Vairatiyaga Satya Pratishtayam Kriya Palashrayatvam Asteya Pratishtayam Sarvaradnopasthanam Brahmacharya Pratishtayam Virya Labhaha Aparigraha Sthirye Janma Katanta Sambodhaha Sauchat Svanga Jagupsa Parayirsa Asansargaha Sattva Shuddhi Saumanasya Ekagriyendriya Jayatma Darshana Yogyatma Nicha Santosharanutama Sukha Labhaha Kayendriya Siddhira Shurikshaya Tapassaha Svadhyaya Rishta Devata Samprayogaha Samadhi Siddhirishvara Pranidhanat Sthira Sukham Asanam Prayatna Shaitylyananta Samapatibhyam Tato Dvandvana Vigyataha Tasmin Satishvasa Prashvasa Yorgati Vichedda Pranayamaha Bahyabhyantara Stambhavriti Deshakala Sankhya Paritrishto Dirga Sukshmaha Bahyabhyantara Vishayaksha Tortaha Tatachate prakashavaranam. Dharanasu chagyogyata manasaha. Shvavishaya samprayoge chittasya svarupanukarendendriyanam pratyahara. Tatta parama vashyatendriyanam. Iti Patanjala Yoga Darshane Sadhana Padaha. Om. And just go ahead and take a few free breaths while we transition to the second part of the meditation, chanting in Sanskrit and English. Feel free to adjust your posture if you need to. And once again, we'll sync up our breath here. Let's all take an inhale now. Atta Patanjala Yoga Darshane Sadhana Padaha. Now, Patanjala's yogic vision of the means to spiritual practice, the sadhana padaha. Dritiyodhyayaha Sutra padaha. The second chapter of his Yoga Sutras, sutra by sutra. Tapasvadyayeshvara pranidanani kriya yoga. Kriya Yoga has three components: discipline, self-study, and orientation toward the divine ideal of pure awareness. Samadhi bhavanatta kleshatanu karanathascha. The purpose of Kriya Yoga is to prepare the mind for samadhi and to reduce pain and suffering. Avidya smitaraga dvesha benivesha pancha klesha. The five causes of suffering are ignorance, egoism, attachment, aversion, and clinging to life. Avidya kshetramutaresham prashupta tanovichinodharanam. Ignorance is the field upon which all the other taints germinate, whether dormant, activated, interrupted, or fully manifested. Anicca suci dukkhanatma sunicca suci sukatma kyatira vidya. Ignorance causes us to see permanence, purity, happiness, and the true self, where the opposite is present. Drigdarshana shaktyo yekatmateva smita. Egoism ties pure awareness and the mind together as the self. Sukhanushayi raga. Attachment follows the experience of happiness and or pleasure. Dukkhanushayi dvesha. Aversion follows the experience of pain and or suffering. Svara savahi vidushopi tataruroho binivesha. Even the wise who know the true self can fear death and cling to life. Te pratiprasavahiya sukshmaha. The subtle kleshas should be destroyed to achieve stillness and be fit for samadhi. Dhyana heyashtadvrittaya. Through meditation, the kleshas can be destroyed. Klesha mula karmashayo drishta drishta janma vedaniya. The kleshas create unripe karma that will be experienced later in this life or in a future life. Sate mule tad vipakko jayat yodbogaha. So long as the root cause remains, they will fructify to produce new births, lifespan, and experiences. Te halada paritapapala punya punye tutvat. These experiences will be delightful or anguished due to the actions that created the karma. Parinama tapasamskara dukayir guna vritya virodak chadukameva sarvam vivekina. Discerning awareness knows that the impermanence of the world, our habits, and the actions of the fundamental qualities of nature cause suffering. Heyam dukkamanagatam. Future suffering or pain is to be avoided. Drashta drishyo samyoga heya hetuhu. The overarching cause of this suffering is the confusion of the seer self with the seen. Pakasha kriya siti shilam bhutendriyatmakam bhogarpavargatam trishyam. What is seen involves the three gunas, the 5 elements, and the 11 senses, which produce experience and the opportunity to withdraw from it. Vishesha vishesha linga matra lingani guna parvani. What is seen can be gross, subtle, manifested, or unmanifested. Drashta drishi matra shuddhopi pratyayanupashya. The true self simply observes without acting or being acted upon. Taratayeva drisyasyatma. The mind's sole purpose is to present the world to the self. Kritartam pratinashtam apanyashtam taranya sadaranatvat. When freedom is reached, the phenomenal world ceases to affect the yogi, but still affects others. Swami shaktyo svarupo paladde hetu samyoga. The tight coupling of the mind to the self makes it difficult to discriminate between the two. Tasya hetora vidya. Ignorance is the cause of this lack of discernment. Tada bhava samyoga bhava hanam tadrishe kaivalyam. Removing the ignorance about the self and uncoupling from the mind allows the self to be free of suffering and disturbance. Viveka kyatira viplavahanopaya. Unwavering discrimination between the seer and seen destroys the ignorance about the self. Tasya sabtada branta bhumi pranyaha. The yogi who achieves samadhi understands all 7 levels of knowledge. Yogan ganus thanara shuri kshaye jnana diptira viveka kiyatehe. The practice of the limbs of yoga reduces impurities and leads to the light of discriminatory knowledge of the self. Yama niyama sana pranayama pratyahara dharana dhyana samadayo stavangyani. The 8 limbs of yoga are behavior towards others, behavior towards self, posture, breath, control of senses, concentration, meditation, and samadhi. Om. And once again, allow your breath to just resume its natural pattern as you slowly come out of your meditation. Feeling free to adjust your posture if necessary. And we'll go on to discussing today's sutra, the 21st sutra, Tad Artha Yeva Drisyasyatma. And translating those words, Tad means it or that, Artha meaning purpose, goal, Yeva only, Drishyasya of the observed or of the seen. Atma is the self or the self essence. So the sutra can be read as the mind's sole purpose is to present the world to the self, to present the phenomenal world to the self, the true self, the observer. So here Patanjali again continues his discussion of what's the self and what's not the self, what is nature, and what is the true self. The seer being the true self, the seen being what we're observing out in nature, but also the body that does the seeing, that's the instrument of seeing, is part of nature. So here, again, we're trying to discriminate between what is the immortal self, what is the self that is in this cycle of rebirth and evolution, and what is the part of us that's just subject to all of the laws of nature, the laws of decay, and actually is doing the dying, if you will, the physical dying as happens in the natural world, or what we think of as death, the aging of the body, for instance, and all that stuff. And he's pointing out here that's the sole purpose of the mind. The mind does nothing else but present the world to the self. Ramaswami, one of my teachers, points out in his commentary on the Yoga Sutra that the mind is always trying to satisfy the self, but that in the end, the mind doesn't need satisfying. It's just going to observe, but the mind is going to continue to keep trying to satisfy it. It's going to keep supplying that data or that movie of what's going on to the mind, to the seer. And Satchidananda writes that we understand these sutras wherever we are. So when we read something like this, we understand it in the place we are in our journey. And that's true of so much of philosophy and wisdoms and teachings in the world, regardless of what system you're in or what culture you come from. I just read a book on the Native Americans, and they use the same teaching stories over and over again. And as a child, you hear the story about the jumping mouse, for instance, as a child, and you understand it as a child, and maybe it's just entertainment. But the adults listen to that same story and they get the nuance, they get the other things that are in there, and the fact that the mouse can't see very far. So the mouse represents introspection and we need to be there, but we also need to be far-seeing and whatnot. And that's that story kind of tells how the mouse learns to do that and learns to do the other things that it needs to do to be a fully realized being. And we hear those stories wherever we are. So Satchidananda is saying that. And so he continues that most of us are under the impression that the true self is experiencing something. But one day, with liberation through yoga or through whatever way we go, we'll know that the self never does anything. Technically, it never enjoys anything. It never not enjoys anything. It just is. It just witnesses. It experiences. And Vyasa, one of the first commentators, also says that to be an object of the self or Purusha, the true self in the shape of experience or liberation, is the real nature of the knowable, the thing that we're seeing or observing, that knowable. But once we become liberated as a yogi or as a being, we don't really need that object anymore. We're done with it. So even though the mind and the world still can project that at us, it becomes unmanifested to us as a self because we don't need that anymore. We've learned everything we need to know from that. We've detached some from the world, even though we're still alive and our body still functions to keep us alive for our lifespan and to allow us to do things that we tend to do. For instance, if we're, again, I've used the term Jivan Mukta before, free in this life, which means we've attained that freedom as a yogi, but we're still sticking around, we're still living out our lifespan, and we may be doing that to teach others and to do whatever it is that we need to do in this life. Kind of like the concept of the bodhisattva in Buddhism, where you choose to come back to relieve the suffering of others. So again, here Patanjali is just still working on kind of that central tenet of the yogic path, which is realization of the true self. And again, that path is pretty common to a lot of other systems of philosophy and religions. The subtle difference, I suppose, or it could be more than subtle differences, what that system views as the true self or the realization of the true self, what it means to be truly human or to transcend humanism, whatever that is that that system's goal is. So this part of that separation of the true self from the mind is a little easier to understand, or seems easier to understand for me, because it's nature. The mind is an instrument, basically. It's a tool or an instrument that presents the world to the self. For me, it's much, the understanding of the true self and the realization of the true self is much more subtle. And obviously, I guess that's true because it takes yogis their whole lifetime to realize that, or many lifetimes, depending on how slow you are. And I would say myself, my experience is that if I get many lifetimes, it'll take that many to become realized. And this is something that a lot of yogis take seriously. Ramaswami, who I've taken classes from, studied with Krishnamacharya for 30 years as a young man before Krishnamacharya passed away. And Krishnamacharya is kind of responsible for really bringing yoga and yoga teachers to the West. In a lot of ways, a lot of the great teachers that have come to the West were Krishnamacharya students. I think Ramaswami is 88 or maybe 90, early 90s now. And he teaches here in the US, sometimes goes back and forth between India and the US. And even though he studied with that master for 30 years and he is considered a guru himself and certainly full of knowledge, and the person I look to try to understand this stuff, he doesn't even call himself a yogi yet. He's still on the path. So it's not necessarily, it's not to be taken lightly. It's not something that all of us get quickly. Most of us don't get quickly. Again, the yogis believe that for most people, it takes many lifetimes. So again, thinking of the body as an instrument and is something that we should take seriously as yogis. We should, like any other instrument that we might have, we should take care of it. We should take care of that body. And yoga obviously has the asanas for taking care of the physical body, and other things that you might do to take care of your body. All of those are good. It's no different than, well, actually it is different, because this tool, this instrument that I have is organic, again, part of living nature. So it decays over time, just like all living matter. Unlike, say, other tools that we might use to experience the world, like a really nice pair of binoculars, for instance, that's inorganic matter. And even though you could say that is going to decay over time, they might not work for thousands of years unless they're taken really good care of. They certainly are going to work longer if taken care of than this physical body of mine. But I should take care of my body maybe even more so than I take care of that inanimate or inorganic tool that I use to observe the world, because of its fragility, because of its temporal nature. So we want to take care of that so that my life, my body serves me throughout my life. And that's really all it needs to do. It just needs to serve me through this life. It doesn't need to necessarily serve me aesthetically. In the West, we tend to maybe overemphasize the aesthetics of the body as opposed to the functionality of the body. I want it to be whole. I want it to be efficient. I want it to be healthy. Being raised in the West, of course, I also would love to be, for my body to be handsome or beautiful as well. I would love it, I suppose, to look like it did when I was 20 and have the same amount of hair. Thickness, that is. I have more hair than I had when I was 20 because I never had long hair before, but till the pandemic hit. But so I have more hair, but also less hair. Sure, I would love that, but that is not really what I need to experience this life as aesthetics. Aesthetics is aesthetics, but how my body works is more important. So it's healthy to present that phenomenal world to us. So that's the sutra this week. The mind's sole purpose is to present the world to the self. So thanks for joining, as always. Thanks for meditating with me, and coming each week to listen to the chanting and settle into some stillness and learning about the various commentaries of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And I hope to see you again next week. I hope this meditation has brought some comfort and ease to your day, settled you down so that you can go out and do all of the things that we need to do in our world in a more relaxed and less anxious way. So thanks, everyone. I will see you next week. Feel free to send me any questions, either by putting them in the chat here or piping in, or you can always send them to me via email or whatever, and I will do my best to answer them. Thanks again, and I will see you next week. Bye, all.
Thanks, Jay. See you, Amanda. Bye-bye.
Here's my references and bibliography that I have been studying along the path of the Yoga Sutras. For those that are interested in doing a little bit more study or just want to know where I get this from. Obviously, I grew up in the culture of the West, and I acknowledge that this learning and wisdom comes from the East, and I'm just a seeker along the path.